Hi guys, welcome all of you to the third lecture of my video series on cryptography. In this lecture, I am going to focus on two basic building blocks of any symmetric cipher. First is the substitution cipher and second is the transposition cipher. If you see the standard symmetric encryption algorithm such as DES and AES, which we are going to discuss in detail in the coming videos, they make use of concept called as substitution and transposition. So we are going to study these two in this particular video. Before we go to the details about substitution and transposition, let us have a quick look on what is symmetric cipher, because we are talking about symmetric ciphers today. I have given a detailed explanation on symmetric ciphers in the previous lecture video. The link of the same is there in the description. So those who don't know about symmetric ciphers can just have a look at it in the link given in the description. So let us have a quick look at what is symmetric ciphers. Any encryption is basically used to convert a plain text into ciphertext. Now, what is plain text? It is a meaningful secret message which the sender wants to keep secret. He does not want to reveal it to the world. He wants to just send it to a particular receiver. So he uses an encryption algorithm, some mathematical concept he applies on the plain text and converts the plain text into ciphertext. A ciphertext is a meaningless junk information which does not make any sense to the other users. It is received by the receiver. The receiver will now decrypt the ciphertext using decryption algorithm, which will now convert the data into a proper message, which is the plain text. So decryption algorithm will recover your plain text back. Okay, now the recovery of this plain text is possible only and only if the receiver uses the appropriate key. So when the encryption and the decryption algorithm, both of them share the same secret key, the sender uses the key for encryption and the receiver uses the same key for decryption. Such algorithms are called as symmetric key encryption and decryption algorithms. The basic building block of symmetric cipher are substitution and transposition. Let us now have a look at the difference between the substitution and the transposition cipher. I shall explain this with the help of an example. Let me say I've got a word hello which I want to transmit to the receiver. This is the secret word which the sender wants to send at the receiver. First, let us say we are using substitution cipher to encrypt this and send. So what substitution cipher does? Substitution cipher takes each letter of the plain text and substitutes, that is replaces it with another letter. For example, H will be replaced with, let us say, U. E will be replaced with another letter, let us say R. L will be replaced by a letter Y. L has occurred again, so it will be replaced by the same letter which is assigned to plain text L, that is Y. O will be replaced, let us say, by X. So this is the cipher text now that is generated by the substitution cipher. So substitution cipher replaces each letter of the plain text by some other letter. The letter which is used to replace that depends upon what is the key and other factors which I will be discussing in the coming videos. In this video, I am just explaining you what is substitution cipher as the basic. Then when we go into the detail of different substitution ciphers, we'll understand how H is replaced by U or maybe some other letter. So which particular letter, that depends upon the algorithm used for substitution cipher and the key that you're going to use, which we'll discuss in coming videos. But as of now, what does a substitution cipher do? Substitution cipher replaces each letter of the plain text with some other letter. So this is the cipher text that is generated. Therefore, substitution cipher is basically based upon the concept of replacement. On the other hand, transposition cipher shuffles the positions of each letter. So H, which was in the first position, has now come in this particular position, that is fourth position. E, which was in the second position, now it has come on the third location, so on and so forth. So L has been shuffled to this location, the other L has been shuffled to this location, O has been shuffled to this location. So transposition cipher is basically based upon the concept of permutation or shuffling. So when you say substitution, it means you have to replace each letter with some other letter from the character set. Well, when you talk about transposition or permutation, you're basically speaking about shuffling the letters. The letters do not change. So H, E, L, L, O are still retained in transposition cipher, but the location of those letters have changed. While if you see the substitution cipher, the letters do not exist in the cipher text. They have been completely replaced by some other letters. Thus, in substitution cipher, each element in the plain text is mapped into another element. For example, these are the 26 letters, capital letters. Each letter is mapped by the substitution cipher into some other letter. For example, A has been mapped to N, B has been mapped to O, C has been mapped to P, and so on and so forth. This is known as one-to-one mapping because each letter is uniquely mapped to another letter out of the 26 letters in the character set. So if I give this word hello to the substitution cipher, H, the corresponding, so these are the plain text letters on the top, and the plain text letters have been mapped to the ciphertext letter. So H, corresponding ciphertext letter of H is U, so my output will be U. E, the letter for E is R, so output will be R. L, so for L, the mapping for L is Y, so my output will be Y. So again L, so output will be Y. O, so for O, my output letter substitution cipher has mapped O to B. So my output will be B. And this is the cipher text that will be generated for this particular word hello. Okay, now this is a unique mapping. A has been mapped to N, B has been mapped to O, and so on and so forth. So there is a one-to-one mapping. There can be a one-to-one mapping or there can be a one-to-many mapping. For example, here L has occurred twice and each L has been replaced with Y. So this is known as one-to-one mapping. L has been replaced to Y. Rather than doing this, we can have one-to-many mapping. For example, the first L may be mapped to Y, while the second L can be mapped to maybe some other letter. So that is known as one-to-many mapping. So based upon whether you are using one-to-one mapping or one-to-many mapping, there are two types of ciphers. The first substitution cipher is called as monoalphabetic substitution cipher. The second type is called as polyalphabetic substitution cipher. So monoalphabetic substitution cipher uses one-to-one mapping, while polyalphabetic substitution cipher uses one-to-many mapping. Some of the examples of monoalphabetic are scissor cipher, multiplicative cipher, affine cipher. While polyalphabetic ciphers are Vigenère cipher, Autokey cipher, and Varnam cipher. I shall explain these ciphers in detail in the coming videos with the concepts as well as numericals. Now let us discuss the detailed difference between a mono and polyalphabetic substitution cipher. Let us take an example again. Let me say there is word hello world which I want to encrypt now using monoalphabetic substitution cipher. So as I told you, substitution cipher means each letter you are going to map it to some different letter. So if I am using a one-to-one mapping, it will be seen that every time a letter L occurs, it has been replaced with Y. Similarly, here O is occurring twice. O is occurring twice. So every time a O occurs, we replace it with B. So monoalphabetic substitution ciphers are the ciphers which uses one-to-one mapping. So H has been mapped to U, E has been mapped to R. So wherever E occurs in your text, it will be replaced with R. L has been mapped to Y. So wherever L occurs in your text, it will be mapped to Y. O has been replaced by B, or O has been mapped to B. So wherever O occurs in your text, O will be replaced with B. So it uses one-to-one mapping. While the same letter, hello world, if you give it to a polyalphabetic substitution cipher, it generates something like this. L is repetitive in this, O is repetitive in this. So L has been first replaced with Y. The second time when L occurs, it has not again been replaced with Y, but it has been replaced with N. The third time when L occurs, it has been still replaced with some other letter which is called as K. Similarly, O is repetitive. It has occurred twice. So first time when it occurs, it is replaced with B. But second time when O occurs, we do not use the same mapping. We use a different letter. So we have replaced O with V. So this is known as we use a one to many mapping in case of polyalphabetic cipher. Whereas when we do monoalphabetic cipher, we use a one to one mapping in polyalphabetic. So every time L occurs, it will be replaced with Y. Every time O occurs, it will be replaced with B. While in polyalphabetic, though L is repetitive, every time it occurs, it won't be replaced by the same letter. It will be replaced by different letters so that you confuse the attacker. Your attacker can easily find out that okay, Y is repetitive, so there are many Y's used, and hence there is some letter which has been used very often. So these are vulnerable. Monoalphabetic cipher is highly vulnerable to security attack. While polyalphabetic cipher, every time you are replacing each repetitive letter with a new letter, and hence you are trying to overcome the repetition frequency, and hence it is more stronger than monoalphabetic ciphers. So why do we need polyalphabetic substitution ciphers? So basically in monoalphabetic ciphers, a attacker can easily decode by doing something known as frequency analysis or statistical analysis. So monoalphabetic ciphers are vulnerable to attacks. A attacker can get the cipher text, he can perform a analysis called as frequency analysis, or we call it a statistical attack, and he can try to predict what is the plain text. One way to overcome the statistical attack is to use polyalphabetic cipher. Polyalphabetic cipher basically hides the frequency distribution of the plain text. Now, what do you mean by this? For example, let me say I have this hello world. And if I'm using a monoalphabetic cipher, I replace the L's. The L is the frequently used in this plain text. When I use a one-to-one mapping or monoalphabetic cipher, we replace every L with the same letter, making it very evident to the attacker that the letter Y is widely used, and hence you can easily use the standard frequency table and find its corresponding letter and replace all the Y's in the cipher text with the L's in the plain text. But the same thing if I'm using polyalphabetic cipher to encrypt the word hello world. So the first letter L will be mapped to maybe Y, but the second letter L, since we are using one to many mapping now, one letter L has been mapped to different letters in the cipher text. So second time when L occurs, we'll map it to some other letter, maybe B. Then the third time the L occurs, we'll map it to some another letter, maybe X. So every time L occurs, it is mapped to different letter, thereby confusing the attacker. So it becomes very difficult for an attacker to predict the corresponding letter in the plain text from the ciphertext. But the same thing if you are using monoalphabetic cipher, since a particular letter repeats itself, he can easily do a frequency analysis and find out that that letter belongs to which particular letter in the plain text. In my next video, I shall speak about statistical attack on monoalphabetic cipher. So see you guys in the next video. I hope you learned about substitution cipher, transposition cipher, monoalphabetic cipher, polyalphabetic cipher. If you learned the concepts, kindly press on like button, comment in the comment section, kindly subscribe and share my video. Thank you so much. Stay blessed.